tear, it falls and hits the ground. A tree, it falls without a sound. A bird, it calls and sends you home. A man, he sits in the cold all alone.
Hi, welcome to The Joy of Sunflowers. You're about to watch an interview with Kim from Just Be Kimmy, and we didn't do an interview intro because we hit it off straight away. So I hope you enjoy this interview where we talk about pregnancy after loss as well as pregnancy loss. She is pregnant currently in this interview, but she has now had her rainbow baby, who is really gorgeous and cute. So I hope you check out her space on Instagram. Links are below the video. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
How is your everything going with your pregnancy so far?
Yeah, it's going okay. I'm still feeling movement. I'm freaking out every time I don't.
I know. It never goes away, does it?
No, I had my radiology appointment and I sort of I'm not radio. Do you call it radiology? No, right? What I had a scan.
Like an
And,
ultrasound
yeah.
appointment? Yeah.
And and I saw the baby and I saw, I laid there and I was like, oh, the baby's there, great. But then it was kind of like, but I'd but is it gonna be here, Like,
I know.
and
I
you just
know.
it's like so annoying because you're like, I just want to.
Horrible. You can't enjoy it at all. It's
It's like,
awful.
where's the where's the contentment? Where's the like, okay, now I've seen the baby, I'm fine now. It's like
I know.
it doesn't even last, a
Not
few.
even 30 minutes outside of the office, because then you get home and you're like, oh, is something wrong here? I don't feel her now. Or
Yeah, and then
oh,
sometimes you're fine, and then you start checking tissue again, and you're like,
yeah. Oh,
but
yeah. Oh, every time I go to the bathroom. Every time.
no, I've been
Yeah.
going through like um moments. Like, so sometimes I'll go to loo and I won't check, and then sometimes I'll go to loo and I will check, and I'm like, well, this is
Yeah.
what I went to the toilet last time and it didn't look. Why am I looking now?
I know. I know. It's so hard. It's like we had a they call it like a retro or I'm sorry. I have a retroverted uterus first of all, so it like tilts backwards, like
Nice.
not forward. And then I also have an anterior placenta which is in the front. So it's been like really hard for me to feel her like really consistently at all. So it drives me crazy. So it's like some days I'm like, oh my God, I haven't felt her in hours. And I'm like that, and then you tell your OB and they're like, well, let's just do like a non-stress test or let's just check it out. And like everything is, of course, is fine, but it's like it just messes with you mentally. It's horrible. And then you go down a rabbit hole and then you start Googling.
Don't Google. So yeah, I
The
think
vicious
there's certain
cycle.
moments where it's like, don't Google. And it's like, that actually is a moment not to Google. The rest of
I
the time we have
know.
to Google because
I know.
medical professionals don't give us enough information. They're like, oh, just, it's like a heavy period. Off you go. No, it's not.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Let us do our research. We know what we're doing.
I know. How far along are you again?
I am only like 22 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. So reaching 20 weeks was like a big deal for me.
Yeah.
Went into the scan. I didn't lose babies at 20 weeks. I lost babies at like 6 and 7 weeks. So I was kind of thinking I'd be fine after I got over that part. And
Yeah.
wasn't. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
speak to all of you women, and like one lady, she said she lost hers at 20 weeks, and I was like freaking out. So then I
I
went,
know.
like, when I got the scan, I thought I'd feel better, and I didn't. I didn't.
No.
You know too much.
No, because yeah, you always hear about. I mean, no matter where you are in pregnancy, like I know a somebody I went to school with, university with, him and his wife they went in for their delivery at 38 weeks, I want to say, and they had a stillbirth. And it's like I don't know the details of it, but like just hearing that, like it's like you always just wonder, like, are you ever going to get there? Like, are you ever going to actually have the baby? You know, it's like, you hate saying stuff like that, but it's just like, it still doesn't feel like reality, you know,
No,
after you go through it.
yeah, and you're like, well, until I'm holding the baby and the baby's like screaming at me, I'm like,
But even then, we probably won't relax.
no,
So,
no. Oh, I've been talking to a few women who have actually had their rainbows, and yeah, they check all the time if they're breathing. And I did that. Like I've had 3 kids first, and then I had 2 losses, and I did check their breathing a lot because I'd heard so much about like SIDS and all this stuff. So I was like freaking out. I got like a secondhand mattress that wasn't really used but had been out like enough to like aerate, and I got like I did like all these different things to try and like minimize the risk. And yeah, so I checked their breathing like all the time.
oh yeah, 100%. I would do the same.
Since loss, I check their breathing like all the time now as well. And I have a 7-year-old, and I check my husband's breathing too. So
It's so funny. I know.
It gets worse, but
Yeah.
better because you're aware.
Yeah. Just in a different way.
Love everyone even more so. And then when everyone wakes up in the morning, you're like, hi.
I know. I know. I know. I know. It's gonna make. I don't know if they have like. Have you ever heard of like those different sleep monitors now they have for babies? Like there's the Booties, like Owlet, I think is one, and I think like Nanit has another one. Like I went and I got one of them, but I'm still like, you know, they can't technically be claim they're a medical device,
Yeah.
you know, because they're not approved through, at least in the US for like FDA regulations. So they actually got fined for saying that they were like a medical device when they're not. Like they say, oh, it can't prevent it, you know, breathing or things like that and monitoring. But for me, I'm like, at least I hope that will help me get a little more sleep. But I've also heard they're faulty sometimes, and that the, you know, they go off, and then I'm like, you know, so great, I'm gonna get startled at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Either that, or just when you're in the hospital, just be like, hey, can I just take one of those machines?
I know, right? I know. Can I just take a whole EKG machine and just hook it up to the baby every night?
Right, thanks. Now I can sleep.
I know. I know.
I think I have thought about it for a while, but I was like, well, I co-sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I have to co-sleep because otherwise I don't get enough sleep. Like I was green after my first child, and I was like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So I started getting sleep with co-sleeping. I don't worry about the baby because I'm like half awake most of the time because I've got the baby right next to me, and I'm like very hyper aware. A lot of people worry they're gonna like crush their baby, but for me, I was like, I'm half awake the whole time. So I didn't get great sleep, but I got way better sleep than I was getting because I was getting like nothing.
Yeah.
But I knew the baby was breathing. I knew the baby was moving. I knew all that stuff because it was literally right next to me and kicking my stomach or like, you know.
Yeah. Right. You felt the movements. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, you know, I mean, they're not inside you anymore, but it was kind of like that because they were pushing so hard.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. This will be our first. So taking home our first, obviously. So it'll be an experience, I think, for sure. But I'm just hoping I can keep it all together with the lack of sleep and paranoia.
I think the most important thing to know is this. No one's perfect. And every mom that you see is winging it. Even if you look up to them, even if you think they're amazing and you're like, wow, they're the best mom. No, they're winging it. They don't know what they're doing. They're just winging it.
You'll figure it out.
And we've all pretty much had this moment where you hold the baby and just like,
oh crap.
I'm like in charge of this. Like this is my thing that I have to look after and I have to keep it alive and it's mine. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've heard that one from quite a few people.
It's just this like realization of like I actually have full responsibility for this human being,
Yeah,
and I have to
I
keep them.
know. Yeah, especially like when they send you home, it's kind of like, all right, good luck.
Yeah, and I mean that's the way it should be, but at the same time, you're like, okay, I feel. I was speaking to a lady who adopted, and she was like, "Oh yeah, we went for parenting classes and all this, and she had to do all that as part of adoption." And I was like, "Yeah, we don't have to do that when you just have a baby." And I was like, "Maybe you should. maybe you should opt for the option, to take
I
parenting
know.
classes because yeah, when you're thrust into it, you're just like, oh, okay, I'm, I'm doing
Yeah. We have optional classes. I mean, of course, they're like charged for them, but I think we
yeah,
signed up for one like in the middle of March. So hopefully it will help. For me, it's more about like CPR. Like I want to know like the emergency stuff. I can figure out how to change a diaper and all that other stuff. I'm
oh
not
yeah,
like as worried, but like the medical like safety aspects of it, choking, like things like that. Like
mm.
that's my biggest fear, I think, is like when you put the baby down at night, like how do you know that they spit up everything? Like, you know what I mean? Like from their feeding. I
Mm.
always worry like if they're on their back, aren't they gonna like choke? You know what I mean? Like it's just like those things that like I think about.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Again, I didn't have to worry about that because I was co-sleeping. You could
Yeah.
like get a co-sleeper bed if you don't want to have the baby in your bed, and then you
Yeah, I'm gonna get one
and
that's
then
gonna go like right next to the bed where it like kind of folds down, I think. So
yeah.
like I see the baby right there, but still it's like, oh, I don't know.
But I mean, you'll be right next to the baby, and you'll hear the baby.
Yeah.
You'll be hyper vigilant probably as well because it's your first, and
Yeah.
your history. So you're going to probably be more hyper vigilant anyway. So I wouldn't stress too much because you're probably going to
Yeah.
stress out anyway.
I
When
know. I know. I'm like, she's not even here yet, and I'm already worried.
every gurgle noise, you're just like, don't good you.
I know.
But yeah, most of the time they're fine. Like they can really work it out for themselves a lot of the time with spit up and stuff. Like they get used to it.
Yeah, I guess
They can't
so.
turn over, but once you put them into a position, they pretty much stay there. Like
Yeah.
it's when they start rolling that's more concerning.
Yeah. Right.
Can you roll the right way? Like stay on the side so you can do your vomity thing and.
Mm,
But yeah, sometimes there's issues as well that causes the vomit. So then you just
yeah.
try different
Yeah.
things. Like I tried dairy free and it actually worked. They didn't vomit
Oh,
again.
really?
Yeah, I
Oh,
tried dairy free and then they stopped vomiting. And I was like, well, there you go. I'm not going to have any
my
dairy.
goodness.
This sucks.
Wow. All right. I'll keep that note.
I really upped my intake of dairy like while I was pregnant because
Yeah.
it's just really bad reflux. So I was like, milk, milk, milk. But then after, yeah, I had to completely cut it out because, yeah, they were throwing up. And it was like
Wow.
projectile. It's disgusting. I said to my husband, I was like, gosh, you must have been like this when you were a kid because he has lactose. And
Okay.
apparently
Yeah.
when I was a kid, when I was a baby, I didn't keep any milk down at all. Like they couldn't even get me to
Wow.
have formula. So I was like, well, there you go. I'll I'll just, yeah, no milk.
Um,
Who would have
yeah. I
known?
guess like you said, you just figure it out, right?
Yeah,
Just
pretty
figure it
much.
out somehow.
Pretty much. And you know what I feel like as well, like a lot of doctors say, oh, that baby's just a sicky baby. And I was like, well, I don't accept that because we don't just throw up for no reason. So, so I started
Right.
like doing what I could and then I found out it was the dairy thing. So yeah, just
Wow.
I'd say just, if there's something going on, like try
Yeah.
different things
Try
like a
different
rash,
things.
like try different things. Don't have certain foods. See if that helps because a lot of the time there is a cause for something. Like there,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I know. I would have never even thought that because you're right. It's like everything that goes into your body, it's gonna translate to the baby.
Yeah.
So
And listen to your instincts because your instincts kind of know, like
yeah,
when you've had the baby, like you kind of you'll know when something's wrong, like you'll know when to worry.
yeah,
Like even with your first, there's like an instinct there, like of okay, this is not okay, you know.
right. Right.
No
Yeah, trust
stress.
your
Yeah.
gut.
But to your story, because I know
Yeah.
a lot of people will probably want to hear your story and sort of where everything began. I'll do a separate intro for you because we've just gone straight into chatting, so it seems like an intro now. So yeah, let's get straight into your story. And sort of starting right at the beginning. So did you always know you wanted to be a mum, or was it something that was more sort of gradual?
Oh yeah. No, I've known ever since I was little with little baby dolls, I wanted to be a mom. So yeah, no, it was something I always knew I wanted to be. My husband and I met later in life. So I was probably, I'm trying to think now, 34, I want to say. And he is 4 years older than me. So he was in his late 30s. We met across country, and, so it took a couple of years for doing, relationship bi-coastal. And when we finally settled down, we really didn't waste much time, and we got engaged, very quickly. We got married. It was a pandemic wedding. So it was only our parents. And then we honestly, we started trying like pretty much right away. Even before the wedding, because we were like, well, I knew you always hear like, oh, over 35, there's so many people that get pregnant. It's not a problem. And I was 37 at the time. And, we just had no clue we were going to encounter the issues we did. My mom always told me growing up, I got pregnant right away with you guys. And my dad would joke like, oh, your mom was fertile, Myrtle. I'm like, your mom's dad. But, yeah, we just didn't think. We had no clue we were going to have the trouble that we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, do you want me to just kind of get into it then and just kind of run through the story and what we kind of went through?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go from the beginning of just sort of from the pandemic. Let's not talk about the pandemic. It's just that was just a weird time. I was having a baby during that time at home, and that was
Oh, gosh, it must have been so hard.
it was interesting. It was interesting. I also had food poisoning at the same time, so yeah.
No.
Yeah. If you get a message in your head to like not eat something, don't eat it.
I know.
I swear it was God telling me not to eat something, and I ate it anyway.
Oh no. Oh, that's horrible. That's
Anyway,
absolutely.
yeah, I didn't think I would have any problems either, because my parents always said, well, my dad always said, oh, all I had to do is sneeze at your mother and she was pregnant. And I was like, ew.
It's like things you don't want to hear. It's like, no, we're good. You don't need to hear this.
Why? I'm your daughter. Like, don't say.
I know, right?
It's like he like found it even more amusing. He was like, I've made you feel really gross now.
Oh my gosh.
They do it to make us cringe,
Yeah, I know. They really do.
I won't do it to my child. I probably will.
I know, right? We say that now, but we'll probably joke someday too.
Yeah, we'll probably say something really horrible, like cringy, like just oh, terrible joke, worst thing ever. Dads are the best for dad jokes. So
yeah.
Mums tell some crackers, and we kind of don't get the bad rap for it. So
yep.
Lucky us. But yeah, start from when you sort of first started trying and sort of realization of things weren't going the way you wanted.
So we started trying, I want to say I had to have been 34, 35, I want to say. Now that I'm thinking about this, my husband and I met a lot earlier, probably in my early 30s. So we decided to start trying right before our wedding. We tried for about 6 months. Then I went to a doctor in the US. They will let you come in if you're over the age of like 35 to see a doctor and to discuss issues or infertility or reasons why you might not be getting pregnant if you're over the age of 35. If not, you have to wait a full year, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because even people like in their 20s have issues getting pregnant, or they could have low AMH or ovarian, diminished reserve. So we started trying, we couldn't get pregnant. I had been with an OB that we were new to the area. So I tried a new OB. She was very dismissive at first. She was just like, oh, like, have you tried this or this? Or, and I'm like, we've tried everything. Like, I'm on Google all the time. and it just wasn't happening for us. So we had been then at that point trying for about a year. I finally got prescribed Clomid. So we went on Clomid. Third cycle of Clomid, we did get pregnant, but we had a very early miscarriage. It was like at 6 weeks. It was very, very early. So that in and of itself is kind of devastating because you think, oh, it's your first positive. You think that just like everybody else, like it's exciting and you're going to have a kid. And it, you know, when it doesn't happen that first time, it's really rough. So we kept trying. We tried another couple of rounds of Clomid. We got pregnant a couple cycles later. And just at that time that we got pregnant, I also had just the week before, I was lifting a piece of furniture and I herniated my disc in my back and I was completely bedridden. So timing wise, it was just absolutely horrible. I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. I went for all sorts of tests, MRIs, this and that. The pain I can only explain is like, you couldn't even like live. Like I remember at one point, like I was like, I can't even like live anymore. Like this is so bad. Like the pain was just so awful. And then on top of that, like you don't want pain meds because you're pregnant. And then you have a pain doctor telling you, oh yeah, you can take, you know, oxycodone or Norco and I'm like, that can't be good for the baby. And then I'd been trying to talk to my new OB that I was with and she wouldn't call me back. And so the pain got so bad over the course of the next few weeks. At this point, we were 8 weeks pregnant. I ended up in the emergency room and I needed emergency back surgery. They found out that the disc was like wrapped around my nerve and I lost all pain in my leg, like all feeling in my leg. And the pain was like just on another level. I can't even explain it. Like I have a whole new appreciation for people who have back problems. So had surgery. They monitored the baby, came out, heartbeat was great, strong, everything was fine. Went to my like 9 or 10 week checkup at the OB, everything looked fine. Then one day I was laying downstairs and I went to go make lunch and put something in the microwave and I keeled over with like just very sharp pain in my right lower abdomen. And at first I was like, oh, it might be just like gas pains because again, this was only like a week and a half to 2 weeks later after my surgery. And you're very constipated when they put you under anesthesia. So I'd been on like some meds for that. Right. And so I was like, and then all of a sudden, like my vision got blurred. It got distorted. I couldn't see anything. I was like sweating through my clothes, like completely sweating through my clothes. My right side, my shoulder was like in pain. Like at first I was like, oh my God, am I having like a heart attack or something? But it was my other side.
Yeah.
So I couldn't move. My husband was at work. I called my neighbor. Luckily, she's a nurse across the street with her little girl. She came over and she called 911. She, you know, I don't even remember exactly what happened, but from there, the ambulance showed up. I completely passed out. They woke me back up. My blood pressure was like, it was like 80/40 or 30. It was like, they're like, we're surprised you're even here right now. And so they got me final stabilized in the ambulance, brought me to the hospital. My pain got worse in my shoulder. And they initially thought maybe, oh, it could be appendicitis, or it could be like your gallbladder like ruptured or something. So they did tests, lots of labs. They wanted to send me for CT scans, which I refused because I said I've already had as much radiation exposure as I can from my back surgery because I had to be exposed to fluoroscopy, which is a really high level. And the ER doctor was getting upset because he's like, there could be something else going on. And I said, you could do one x-ray. Like, that's it. You could do an x-ray. So he did an x-ray. And he said, all I see is like pooling of blood. He said, it's probably a cyst that ruptured. It's probably fine. He said, we're going to admit you. We'll send you upstairs. Well, the pain got worse and worse and worse. And so overnight, now at this point I was admitted at like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And at 6 a.m., I had a team of doctors like rush into my room. And they said they finally had an OB look at the scans and the imaging. And they're like, we don't mean to scare you, but we need to get you down to the ER right now. They said, we think that you have a tube that ruptured and that you're basically at risk for like potential, like you could lose your life, this, that, we got to get it taken care of. So we're like, I'm like in a frenzy. I had no idea what was going on. It was happening so fast. They couldn't, I told them my blood type. They're like, it doesn't matter. We don't have time to like review your labs. Like, we're just going to give you O. And I just remember telling my husband, I was like, just make sure they don't take everything. I was so worried that they were going to like, it was like my, our first child, like, and I'm like, if that, like my tube is gone, like, are they going to take everything else? So sorry. It's like been a while since I've talked about it.
Yeah, no, that sounds really terrifying. Like,
it was very terrifying, very terrifying. So I woke up from surgery. They brought me upstairs and they said, it was the weirdest way that they said it was, he's like, it's almost like you won the lottery, but in like not the greatest way. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, he said, you're basically like 1 in 30,000. He said, we don't ever see this. He says, you had a heterotopic pregnancy. And I was like, what is that? And he said, well, the baby you knew you had in your uterus, you also had a second pregnancy that was in your tube that was never found. And so it ruptured, which he said there was 2 very, very rare things about it. Is he said, first of all, it happened on, even though it was Clomid, they said it's technically a natural pregnancy. I guess they usually see it more with like IVF. And then he said the second part is like I was almost 11 weeks pregnant. And he said, usually this happens like way earlier. Like my HCG levels had been tested. They were rising. They were over 100,000. Like, there was like the fact that it was in there for that long and they didn't see it. All of the ultrasounds that I had had before and after my back surgery at my OB's office, like nobody saw it. And, for me, it was a lot about like, how could they miss this? And so it was a lot of like acceptance for like, why did this happen? I went through an entire first trimester pretty much of pain. I couldn't have pain meds. I was crying myself to sleep every single day because of my back. And I was like, if you're just going to take them from me, like, why put me through this, this late? So it was very, very traumatizing experience. And I think, for me, it was just I needed a reason. Like I needed to know like why, and there was no why, like no, why this happened, why it was missed. And I think that's like the hardest part, I think, for anybody going through like, whether it's infertility or pregnancy loss, it's not having answers. Like, even if it's something that you don't want to hear, at least it's an answer,
Yeah. Well, I mean, if your back was hurting that whole time, you could have actually had pain from the sort of, it's ectopic, right? Because that second baby, right?
So
that ectopic, you could have been getting pain from that as well, but not realizing that's where the pain was coming from, because you can feel pain.
It's possible. Yeah.
So that could have been the reason why they missed it, because you were already in pain, so they just put it down to the back, because your back was already, so then as you progressed and the back got better but you didn't, that's obviously what happened. But maybe that's why, like, your body was warning you there were signs,
right,
but those signs weren't picked up because your back was already a problem.
And you would think that, on all the image, I mean, I had like 3 MRIs done. I mean, MRIs take like, pictures of everything, like in 360-degree view, and then the x-rays and, fluoroscopy. I'm like, how is this missed? And and then I went back and I looked through my records at one point, your hospital records, and it said in the ER, for my ER doctor notes, he put like most likely a cyst, incredibly rare chance that it could be a heterotopic pregnancy. So we think we should rule that out. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, so this was never even mentioned or discussed. Like, first of all, and so it's just your mind just starts going like in circles. It's like, so I was sitting there bleeding out in a hospital. Well, I mean, even before then. So like at noon the day before, and I didn't get into surgery until like 7 the next morning. And you hear about women that have died from ectopic ruptures. So the whole thing, it's just like, it's like a weird feeling because you feel like blessed, to like be alive. And like, luckily they were able to save my ovary on that side, which was really good. So it was just the tube. But then it's like, on the other hand, you're like, how was this missed? Like, and you just feel like you need somebody to blame, it's like, how did the OB miss it? How did the ER doctor miss it? How did the back surgeon miss it? Like, how did all of these really smart, intelligent people miss something so big? And when I asked my doctor, how do I prevent this from happening again? She's like, honestly, she said, it's not what you're going to want to hear. But she said, honestly, she said, if we didn't catch it, she says it was probably hiding, or it just wasn't very visible on the imaging. Not that, I mean, I just wonder, like, were they actually focusing on that? When I was in for my back, they actually ruled out ectopic pregnancy because they wanted to like check to see if the baby was there, like, was there heartbeat? Because I hadn't been for an image yet. So it's a very weird place to be in. And then I remember, because it had been at that point, because they counted them as twins, it would have been our third loss. They were going to send tissue samples, off to a lab just to like see, okay, like, did it have anything to do with a recurrent type of miscarriage scenario? Like, was there, because they said the one baby, I guess, in the uterus, looked like it was maybe measuring like a little bit under. And so when they sent all the tissue samples off, I finally got a report back about 2 months later. And there were two things that happened. So the first part is they said they sent all the samples in. Well, something got messed up at the hospital and they only sent in one of the samples of one of the babies. And to me, that was like gut wrenching because like I found out one of the genders of our baby, which was a boy. I never knew the other one. So I felt like this child never got an opportunity to like be known. Well, like we found out about it afterwards. Like, I don't know which baby it was, like what happened. And of course, like when you reach out to the doctors, they just think, oh, anything under, in first trimester, it happens. It's so frequent. Like they just think it's like, brush off the shoulder. It's like not something they take very seriously. And I think that's like the hardest part. But we actually did find out that one of the babies, or the baby that they did test, had trisomy, I think 15, which is related to age. It's a chromosomal abnormality. So like it's the hardest thing I've ever went through in my entire life by far. But it gave me a little bit of peace of mind to know that it's not comparable to life. Like in 99% of cases, like I could have gone till 20 weeks had that not happened. And I would have been faced with an incredibly difficult decision potentially. And so then I started thinking, okay, like this maybe happened for a reason. It's horrible. It's awful. It's gut wrenching. But, I think through that, it was like a way for me to accept a little bit more of what happened, if that makes sense. So
you are lucky to be here. You're definitely a miracle sitting in front of me again. I've had 3 of you miracles now. So maybe if we go back in time for a second, just to say about your first miscarriage. So how did that go? Because I had a 6-week, but I had a sac and it carried on growing, and I did it all naturally. So it carried on growing until like week 14.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I passed the egg.
Kidding. So you didn't know until later?
No, so I did know. We got the scans and everything. So I knew there was no baby. I knew it was not growing. It was not forming. Like there was just black. So I knew that. But I was like, I'll do it naturally. And I had to wait
it took a long time to pass.
2 months for it to just naturally just go, okay, my body is like, okay, we're done now. This is not a baby. But it took that long. And I had all morning sickness. I had like all the hormones, everything, because the sac was still growing. So that whole time, obviously, I was in a bit of a pit. Like I just kind of got depressed and just was miserable.
That's so hard.
Yeah. So that was,
yeah, for us it was a little different. So like here, most OBs, unless you have a past history, at that point we didn't have a history of like miscarriage or anything else. So normally an OB won't schedule you until at least 8 weeks for your first ultrasound. So for me, it was more about like, oh, I got my positive pregnancy test. And of course I was peeing on sticks, like, 4 times a day, like a crazy person. And so it was more like, I was testing. And then I was looking at the line progress. And then all of a sudden, like one day I was like the line literally just got like from red to like pink. And so I was like, okay, maybe this is the test. So then I kept taking other ones. And then the next day it was like pretty much gone. And so I called my doctor and they said, well, come in, we'll do a blood test. And we did the blood test and it was like the HCG was like 5, which is, it would have been way too low. So that's pretty much, so for me, I just ended up getting a very, very heavy period, a couple days later, because it wasn't far along, at all in that case.
The heavy period exists.
Oh yeah.
There you go, ladies.
Yeah.
It exists. I don't know if you're one of the women sitting there listening and you have had a heavy period loss. Mm-hmm. Okay, but all the women I've spoken to, this is the first time I've heard it was a heavy period. So it does happen. Yeah. The doctors aren't lying. It's real. Now I'm going to be telling women that, no, it is real. I have spoken to a real legitimate woman who had a heavy period. Yeah. But yeah, it's because when I heard that, I was like, oh, great. Okay. It was just a heavy period. And it wasn't at all. Like I gave birth to a sac, and other women have had similar things where it's like, they were like, that was beyond a heavy period. It was not just a heavy period. So you actually had like a heavy
it was period. Just a very it was more uncomfortable than normal, but it was nothing like out of the ordinary. Like I think for me it was more mental. Like I was like, oh my gosh, am I gonna have to am I gonna experience something different than like your normal period? But because I guess it's 6, you're only it's like basically you find out you're pregnant for like a week is like, and then you get to 6 weeks, so it's really not that long. But for me, it was, I associated it with a heavy period, and then you think about all these other women who are like, oh, my period was late. You just think about like in your lifetime, you have friends that are like, oh, my period's late. And they're like, oh, but I got it. It's like, it makes you wonder how many of these women actually did have implantation, were pregnant for a few days. And then your body just, rejected. So I think it's just so much more common than people realize. I think it's only when you're tracking it and you're actively trying, you start to realize, Yeah,
there are actual doctors and sort of sciencey, people who are saying that they reckon it's actually more women have miscarriages than we think, and it is based on that whole thing of, oh, I had a late one, but I got it, so it's so good. I think maybe sometimes that actually is a miscarriage and they just don't know, because a lot of women don't realize, but the 2 weeks before their bleed is actually counted into pregnancy. Right. So a lot of women realize that. I didn't realize it until I got pregnant, and they're like, oh yeah, it's already, and I was like, what, how is that possible? Because and then you're like, oh yeah.
I know. I was like, it's like, wait, I'm already a month pregnant, how did that work?
Like I just found out, like, how is that?
Yeah, but when you think about it though, they say stats are like 1 in 4. It makes you wonder if it's even higher than that though,
Yeah, I honestly, the last, I think I've spoken to about 3 women that where we've said, we think it's more than 1 in 4, because it just doesn't make any sense. Like I know a lot of women who have been through this, and some of them sought medical help, and some of them just went it alone. So I think
Yeah.
it probably is higher, especially if people aren't actually going to the doctors and getting it sorted out
Exactly.
and finding out about it. Because then they're not reporting.
Or aren't trying, and then they're not peeing on tests, so they don't know like if it was actually a pregnancy or not, like because they're just not tracking it, and they just crop it up to, oh, my period was late by a few days, right? Yeah, I think it's probably a lot higher than we think, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, especially now that you've told me it can actually be a heavy period looking thing. So
yeah, that early, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think like, so for example, like my sister, unfortunately, she also had she had some difficulties as well. She didn't get to the IVF route. Luckily, she did get pregnant. She's actually 3 months behind me right now. She had a miscarriage 2 weeks before we had our first, while we were all on vacation, a family vacation together. And for her, it was at 8 weeks. And she noticed her symptoms started to go away. And then she started spotting. And then while she was at the airport, she said that it actually felt like contractions, like she was going into labor. Like that's what it felt like. And she sounds like a similar experience to you. Like, she passed very large pieces of tissue, was bleeding on and off, heavy bleed for a few days. And then sadly, in her case, apparently the tissue didn't all get passed, and she had to have a DNC, and then she had to have a repeat DNC because the first one didn't get it all either. So she like spotted for 3-4 months, which is just awful.
Yeah, no, that's really crappy. I went for natural. I went for natural, and apparently it all came out. There was like a tiny bit left in, but the doctor was like, not enough to be a problem, and it will come out in your next period. So I was like, okay, great.
I know. What do they expect you to say, right?
Yeah.
I know.
They look at you and you're like,
I know.
Thanks.
I know.
Thank you.
Right.
So my baby will come out. Fantastic.
It's so hard.
But
so hard.
No, it really is. It really is. But yeah, it's so yucky too. It's so gross. Like,
yeah, I know. And like, I know. And like with our heterotopic, the weird thing for me is like, I never bled. Like I ruptured, but I was never bleeding, which to me, I'm thinking like, if I'm bleeding like that internally, like in my uterus, like, why am I not
bleeding?
I didn't spot. I didn't bleed. Honestly, even after the surgery, I had extremely minimal spotting like the day of, and like, that was it. And so it just didn't like process, it's like, how does that happen? And I had 2.5 blood transfusions too. Wow. So you would think that with that amount of blood gone, that you would be bleeding, but I didn't. So I don't know. I think it's just strange. I don't think we'll ever understand it, but I think it's just, it varies. Like people go through some where they bleed, some don't, some do, some is painful, some it's not. It's like, I don't know, just, it's all over the board.
Yeah. No, it is crazy when you think of that. Like you're bleeding inside, but then not
like,
on the
where's
outside.
it going? Right. And like my stomach was, I mean, I actually have a photo I can show you, but like my stomach was distended about 2 feet out. And so it was horrible. And that's why I kept thinking like, oh, it's constipation or something. Like, I was just like, that's gotta be what it is, because like everything else, felt normal. So they had me drink like a gallon of, what is that stuff that, for like colonoscopy preps, like they had me drink like a gallon of something, and it didn't even work. Like I was so shut down, like all of my organs like just weren't running pretty much, inside. Yeah, it was horrible. And then of course, when they do the surgery, a lot of it's done through laparoscopic plus vaginal. So like the laparoscopic, they inflate you on top of that with air so that they can see. So, I mean, I was really big. It was horrible. It was horrible. I mean, I think it's okay that I can laugh about it now, but at the time it was like, it was horrible, just horrible.
Well, you know, when people say those things that are like not helpful, I feel like they'd be like, well, at least your body's stretched out. Now it's easier for you to stretch out for your baby. I love people and what they say.
I know. It's like, but the but never, when a sentence starts with but, you know, it's not good in the first place.
Or
But
at least.
when you add at least, like at least you can get pregnant, or at least, and it's like, no, just stop right there. Just stop.
Oh, so good. Yeah.
Oh.
The only person that's allowed to say at least is the person going through it.
Exactly. I know.
We can say at least. At least I'm still alive. That's...
I know.
So with this one, if we'll just go into like sort of how you sort of ended up pregnant and how it sort of went from there.
Yeah. With the second one or the first one?
So we've done the miscarriage.
Or I'm sorry, this one. I keep thinking there's so many pregnancies. And first one, second one. You mean the one right now that we're carrying?
The one, yeah, the one, because I'm guessing that they were the two losses, and now
correct. Yeah, this was our third pregnancy. It'll be our first live birth. Yeah. So after all of that happened, I took, in the US, they have FMLA, which is usually you take it for, it's like job security for your job. I had taken it because I was recovering not only from my back surgery, but obviously the trauma of everything that happened and just trying to like mentally wrap my head around it. I had a bruise that's also spanned across my entire abdomen, and I can share a picture of that. I couldn't move for like the first 2 or 3 weeks. But mentally it was, you know, like I sunk into a deep depression. You know, I cried all the time. I didn't fall asleep until 4 or 5 every day, wouldn't wake up until noon. It was like, just became this like vicious cycle, and it went on for a couple months. And, you know, eventually my FMLA ran out because you only get 3 months, and I had used part of it for my back surgery already. So I went back just before the Thanksgiving US holiday here in the US. And it was very difficult going back into like, you know, a full-time job. And I was in a leadership position, and like having to like shut that part of your brain off when it's still like just consuming you like inside, and you haven't really like dealt with it, was really hard. So I tried and I pushed through for a couple months. And then over the Christmas holiday, my husband and I actually sat down, and, you know, we were both very, very hard workers. Like we worked all hours of the day, the night. We don't have like a medium. It's like an on and an off switch. And between working, you know, like a workhorse, also trying to process everything, also trying to restart our family after everything, trying to figure out the timing of all that. And then when we did try, we couldn't get pregnant again, which went on for about 6 to 7 months again. And we had already done as much Clomid as we possibly could. They had doubled the dose. They tried everything. They said, don't worry, even though you have 1 tube, it'll be fine. So I started going through all the tests, the procedures, HSG, saline sonogram, all of it. Everything looked good. So we were like, okay, why isn't this working for us? So we had actually sat down and we decided for me to take a step back from my career, which for me was probably, you know, next to what we had went through with everything, was probably the most difficult decision I had to make professionally, you know, to take a step back in your career and just be like, I need to take this time for me because I need to be okay. And I wasn't, you know, I was struggling. I was, you know, crying every day. I was upset. I just needed that time. So I gave my employer like 2 months of notice, and then took a step back. And then at that point, we were teed up for an IVF consultant conversation. We looked at, I probably spoke with 2 or 3 different places locally. There was only like really 2 places local to where I live. And it was going to cost in US dollars about $30,000 for 1 round. And insurance in the US is not great when it comes to fertility coverage. I know some countries have it great, but there's also other caveats with it. Like you might have to be on a waiting list or things like that. But in the US, like we had zero fertility coverage with our employers. So it was going to be 100% out of pocket. And then in speaking with some consultants, they said, given your age and this and that, obviously it's unexplained infertility or potential tubal factor. They said, they said your odds are probably okay, like pretty good. But they said at the same time, age comes into factor. And like what was new to me is they said, it's not always the female. They said, because my husband was 41 at the time. And he, they said it can be both. Quality goes down in both with age. And that was something new for me because I kept putting all like the blame on my shoulders, right? I think as women, we shoulder that.
Yeah.
So we decided to then move forward with a practice that is out of state. So I have family. I'm not from Ohio. I live in Ohio, but my family lives in New York. And so about a 5-hour drive for me, there's a clinic that's called CNY Fertility. And basically their motto is making the priceless affordable. And I just kind of like that because they accept everybody, whether you're, overweight, whatever your history is, no matter how many issues you have, they don't like keep track of all the statistics like most places do to like worry about their numbers and, oh, can this person get pregnant or can they not? Is it going to hurt our statistics? And so they accept everybody. And so it was going to cost us probably, I would say, so like a normal round was like 30,000. We paid about 16 to 18, I would say, per round. So like that adds up. And factoring in, we're going to need multiple rounds. They said, you might want to factor in a couple of rounds. And for me, I'm thinking like, oh, IVF, like one and done. Like, let's just do one round and we'll get pregnant. It didn't turn out that way either for us either. So we decided to move forward with this. And I actually then went and stayed with my family at their house for 2 weeks at a time to go through the IVF process. So we started IVF last end of February. And I was there every other month. We did 3 retrievals and then we did our first transfer in July, at the end of July. And that was the one that luckily we're so blessed our first one took. But we went through, our first round was not good at all. My body didn't respond to the stims meds. We had 5 blasts and we ended up with 1 that was PGT normal, which, everyone will say, oh, it only takes 1. It only takes 1, but it's like, at my age, I was 37 and a half at the time. And I'm like, but we would love to have more than 1 child. So for us, it was more about a decision of like, let's see how many, healthy embryos we can get now. So we don't have to do this and then have worse results like when I'm 40, right, for our second child. And I think it was one of the better decisions we could have made. It was frustrating along the way to like, you have to wait and, you just want everything to like go as fast as possible. But it was the right decision for us. And, each round our protocol changed. It did get more expensive because we had more meds added on, but my body started responding more. I had been on supplements longer. I had been on different egg quality, medications for a longer time. So it did work. And then, our July transfer, it worked. The first 9 days that you wait were the longest 9 days of my life. I think I went through like 3 panic attacks during those waits, because it's like, they tell you not to test. And then I'm like, but I need to test. But I had been given HCG boosters, they say it tricks your body into thinking it's pregnant. So like you're already showing a positive line from like day 1. So really you're trying to see, okay, did it get darker? Did it not get darker? And so your mind just starts going in like this spiral in tailspin. And it was horrible. And then, once we got our first positive beta and we got the numbers, we're like, okay, I feel good. But then it's like, just like you said, at an appointment, you go to an appointment, you're like, okay, great. You feel so good. And it calms you down. And then like the next day you're like, but it's about the next one. It's about the next test. It's about the next scan. Are they going to see what they need to on the ultrasound? Like, are they going to just see the sac? Are they going to see a heartbeat? where are my symptoms? Like I was so sick up and through 20 weeks, but there were pockets where you'd like wake up and you're like, I can eat this morning. What's wrong? Something's wrong. It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So,
It's like you have to reach each milestone.
yes.
And then it's still not, because
and there's so many milestones.
The ultimate milestone is having the baby in your hands, and crying. So until that point, and even then, it's not real. It's not happening, which is terrible. But yes, I totally feel you there. Have you done anything to kind of build that hope in yourself? Like, have you like done a gender reveal and have you had a baby shower and all that sort of stuff?
So our baby shower is actually on Sunday. So we're actually driving up to go see all my family and everybody. Yeah, it's weird. It's like, you go through these like milestones and you're like, okay, like I can start to get excited. But I don't feel like the excitement that I always thought I would feel, if that like makes any sense. Like, like you hit these milestones and it's like, you might have a good day one day where you're like, okay, like like I'm pregnant and this is like what it is. And this is how I feel. And I'm feeling good and I'm feeling positive. But it's like, like I should be ecstatic for my shower. And I am excited. Don't get me wrong. But it's like, there's always that like what if fear, like in the back of your head, like what if we have this? Or like the nursery we just did a couple weeks ago, like, I mean, it's not even fully done, but like we finally just painted it and put the furniture and everything in there because you get terrified, you get worried, like, well, what if I do this, or if I start to prepare, or if I get ready, like, am I setting myself up for heartbreak, if something happens? And I think it's just, we self-sabotage, and I don't think there's like a way to prevent it, unfortunately.
Yeah,
go through this.
I have spoken to a few ladies where they got the room ready early, and and the baby passed away, and now they can't walk in the room. The room is now a stuff room and they can't go in there. And I think it is a self-preservation, and I don't think that's unreasonable for us to do that after we've had loss. Like, it makes sense. We're not being illogical. We're actually thinking ahead of time. But I think where you are now, give into it more, give into that hope more, and even if it doesn't go the way you want it to, just remember you enjoyed that. Like, just remember that love that baby and you had that moment, and that's what's getting me through. I did a post that said, I'm pregnant right now, because right now I am. I don't know how long that's going to last. I don't know if I'm going to have a baby in my arms at the end, but I know right now I'm pregnant, and that's what matters for me. And I think if we all can get that in our heads, we can enjoy a bit more, because then we're just like, well, right now that's what I am. Right now you are 35 weeks.
33 weeks.
33 weeks
today. Yeah.
So right now you're 33 weeks, and the baby is in you right now. You might not be able to feel it because of the placenta being in the way, but the baby's there and alive and loving you, and you're loving the baby. So that's all that matters, and that's what we can hold on to until that baby's in your arms. I'm going to be praying and telling the baby, baby, be born at the right time and be healthy, and scream at your mom.
It's so true. And like, for me, like, I know, like, through all of this, like, we've always grew up in, of faith. We didn't go to church every Sunday, growing up. Life gets busy, things like that. But my faith has grown tenfold, 10 times stronger. And I think it's because you just feel like you need something to grasp, or like to hold on to, and to feel like there's a higher power that's out of your control, A, right? And then B, that, you have, whatever people believe, whether it's spiritually or through faith, that there's just something else that's in control. And I think for me, I felt like that like took a lot off of my shoulders, that like maybe this was God's plan, or, like, you just don't understand it at the time. But then, like, people say is like, once you have that baby, you know, they say you will understand why it happened the way it did. And I think it's hard in the moment for us as women to try and understand that, but I can see why people say that at the same time. And I think, you know, it's true to what you say. It's like, you have to be able to, you know, it's almost like just say, okay, I'm pregnant today. I'm pregnant. There's a baby. Like, I just went for one of my non-stress tests this morning and feel great. But like, I can tell you, and you know, like, I haven't felt the baby move much in the last like hour or two. So it's like, of course your mind just starts, I know it's nothing. I know it's normal, but no matter what you do, you're still going to go to that awful place. Right. So,
Yeah.
it's tough, but I think like faith has been like one of the really strong things I think that's gotten me through and is getting us through. You know, and my husband, you know, has always said it from, you know, day one, like it's not up to us. Like, and I think for me, there's some sort of peace in that. You know, before I was like, but why? I'm mad at God. Like, and, you know, I would talk to like my pastor at church and he'd be like, it's okay to be mad. Like, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to point fingers and, you know, feel what you need to feel. Like, I think all of us are entitled to that. So, but it's helped for sure.
Yeah, I think doing that, saying that, you know, it's not up to us, that is always, I think, a really helpful thing, because you can't, I mean, we don't have control over it, you know, we don't. And I think once we accept that, and I think having God makes it easier to accept, because without God, you're just like, well, why can't I change that? Why can't I control that? So having God, you're just like, well, it's in his hands. So then you can kind of hand it off easier. But normally I think it's harder because obviously, you know, you're like, well, who's in charge then? Someone has to be in charge. So yeah, it helps.
Somebody to blame, or we need somebody to like tell us like, this is my, you know, I controlled this, or I did this, or it was my fault. Because like, you know, like when I was going through everything, I was like, I need somebody to blame. Like, I don't, not that I like, you know, would do anything, but I'm just like, I just need to know why. Like, there needs to be somebody. Is it a doctor? Somebody needs to be held accountable for it. And I think until you get that shift, and you start to like, at least for me, I know not everybody's of faith, but like for me, it was faith. And it was like being like, you know, my husband telling me over and over, it's not up to us. Like, you know, it's not like we could have done whatever we wanted. But at the end of the day, he's the one who decides. And for me, there was, eventually I came to some sort of peace in that. And it definitely, I think, helps still. You know, I like to think that he wouldn't put me through more pain after everything we've gone through. But you know, it helps. It helps.
Yeah, no, it really does. It does. And my husband said the same sort of thing to me, you know, it's not up to you, and you know, we just have to accept whatever happens. And it is hard. It's hard to hear that sometimes, you know, and yes, it's easy to shout at God because we can, which I was like amazed about. I was like, what, I can have a go at him? Great. I'm gonna do it all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you know, he loves us, and we can do that. And I think as well, the reason why it strengthens us so much is because it's not our strength that we're leaning on, it's his. And he's
exactly.
Like, he's got
100%
unwavering strength. It's just strength.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we you know, we can pretend that we have all the strength, but
no, I mean, I think on all of us, I mean, like all these women you're meeting with, they're all fighters. I mean, the strength comes from somewhere. And, you know, for me, it's like, you know, so, I mean, when you have like some family members or close friends and they hear or see what you've gone through, and it does give some sort of helpful, you know, validation when they're like, I can't believe everything you've been through, and you guys are, you know, you're still trying, you've thrown out so much money. You're like, they're like, you know, they're going to have one, you know, hell of a mom, or, you know, somebody that fights this hard, you know, for them. And there is some, you know, it makes you feel good, I think, when you kind of hear that from people. I mean, those are the things that you want to hear, like, versus, well, at least, right? So
yeah,
it just gives validation, I think, to like some of the things that like you go across in your mind, because you don't feel strong when you're going through it. I think you feel really weak and you feel beat down, and you feel like, you know, for me, I always thought like I'm the strongest person, but I felt like the weakest person going through all of this, like the weakest person in the world, you know? and you just feel so defeated all the time. So the validation, I think, is really, really helpful when going through this.
Yeah, definitely. And you being here, that is strength. Because some women, you know, it makes it really hard to face a day. And you being here, that is showing strength.
Yeah.
That is showing, you know, that you can get through hard things.
Yeah.
So it's tough. And you are a testament, and so many women on this event are a testament to show you can get through hard things, even if you're at that point where you're like, I can't do this. I don't think I can face another day. You can. We've all done it. We have all done it. We've faced that horrible day. We have kicked it in the face. We might not have even kicked it in the face. We probably just fell on the floor and cried. But we've been there. And if we can do it, you can do it. And is there anything you want to say to anyone who's listening today who maybe has gone through what you've gone through, or is going through that right now, and they're in in the trenches of loss?
For me, it's more about, I mean, advice is so, what's the best way to say it? I mean, depending on what advice given or how you receive it, it could be, you could read it 100 different ways. I think for me, the biggest thing I think that was important to hear, that I think for others to hear, is like just validity. Like, what you're feeling is valid. You have the right to be upset. You have the right to want to scream, to want to blame somebody, to want to give up. Like, you know, everybody has their own personal decisions and fight and struggles. And I think the biggest advice is know that you're a strong person. Like, know that you're going to get through it one way or another. You know, not having answers is really, really difficult when you're going through it. I hope that everybody here, you know, or everybody that's going to be joining will have their miracle someday. I think that's all that we can hope for. But we know, unfortunately, that isn't the case for everybody. And I think it's just keep going, do what you can. If you need to give up, that's okay too. But just know that there's a huge community of supporters around you. I think that for me, that was one of the biggest things, just like opening up, you know, like for me, like my page, I created a separate account. I blocked like most of the people I knew so that they couldn't find me. But just being able to transparently, like, you know, for me, it was like almost like a coping mechanism, you know, like however people need to feel to share it. If they want to share it with people, if they want to keep it private, it's all okay. So I think that was just
I like that you blocked people you knew.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and it's not that you just don't want to be judged when you're going through stuff like this, because, you know, you think some people are going to be like, I could just see it, you know, even, you know, whether it's your close friends or family, they'll be like, oh, why are they sharing such personal stuff, or whatever the reason is. And it's nothing personal, to be honest. It's just, you know, some people did find me, which, you know, they've been actually very supportive. But I don't know. It's just, it's like, it's for me, like, it's my thing. It's like my thing I want to keep private in a way. Right. And then share it with people who understand what you're going through. And I think that's all we really all want at the end of the day, is just like help and support from one another, and like for people to actually like understand and not judge. And I think, you know, being judged is like one of the biggest things I think we probably all worry about. You know, people going to judge me for oversharing, or for exposing this, or for whatever it is. You know, we have enough that we're going through already. Like, we don't need to deal with that too. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's so true. It's silly. Like, why do we even care? But we do care.
I know.
It's so important.
I know. And then, you know, slowly but surely, like I would start on my own personal page, I would start to share, you know, like a lot of people had no idea what we had went through. And, you know, when we finally did get pregnant and we did decide to share our pregnancy announcement, we did shed light on like, you know, this has been a miracle in progress. Like this was an IVF pregnancy. We've gone through, you know, a couple of years of infertility and, you know, all sorts of stuff. And it's what I think been most amazing is just finding all the support, or people that actually are going through it too, that you had no idea. you know, like people that say, oh my gosh, I had a loss too, or I went through this, or oh my God, you know, it just helps. And I think it's like, it's kind of taboo, I think, unfortunately, like infertility or sharing that part of your life, because some people think it should be more private, or you know, miscarriage or any of it, right? And I think just like breaking that stigma is just so important. And it's okay if people want to stay private about it, right? But why is there such a stigma around it? There shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think I found as well, one of our speakers, she said, I thought infertility was the taboo, but pregnancy loss is a taboo. Absolutely. And I said, yeah, because, you know, there is a sort of invalidation of life. There is this kind of, you know, oh, well, it's just this. It's not a real baby. It's not a real human.
Yep.
And I think that's where it comes from. That's why it's so taboo, because people don't want to face the fact that it's a real baby and it's a real loss.
Yes.
You know, and there's a lot of women I've met who have been through this.
Yep.
And they see it that way because it's helped them cope.
Yes, 100%.
You know? Okay, 100%. I don't want to make you feel really sad, but at the same time, that was a baby, and it's okay to be sad about it.
Right.
You know, don't tell me I can't be sad about it.
Right.
It's okay that you're fantastic.
Yeah.
But, you know, I get that that's your mechanism, but it's not mine.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's so true. It's that. And then it's the people that are like, oh, well, I don't want to see something sad, or I don't want to hear, you know, like they don't want to like hear about it. And it's like, it's okay, but it's like, we're not acknowledging what's happening then. And we're not acknowledging what people are really going through, and like the pain that people, you know, keep enclosed. And it's a very isolating thing to go through, like pregnancy loss. I mean, first of all, there's this whole taboo about sharing you're pregnant before first trimester is over. Right. Yeah. And I have all sorts of opinions on that, because it's like, share when you're comfortable, right? You know, but then like on the other hand, people that go through pregnancy loss are like, oh, she's pregnant for her 4th time and sharing it 6 weeks. Great. You know? But I think like everybody goes through like their own journey and their own struggles. And I think everybody just, I mean, it's so isolating. And when you just find even one person that you can empathize with, that you know has gone through something similar, it just provides so much more comfort. And I mean, it's a very, isolating. That's all I can say. It's just a very isolating thing to go through, you know, and I think only a very small number of people that actually go through it or experience it truly understand. I think people will try and understand, or you have friends and family that will do their best to try and understand it, but you really don't until you go through it. You just, I mean, even I think about how naive I was, you know, like growing up, I'd be like, oh, like, you're married, are you planning on having kids? Like the questions that you do not ask, you know, now going through things like that. But it's like, you think about it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was such an asshole in my language. But you know what I mean? Like different things that like, you just don't think about. And it's not that it's not that it's their fault. I think it's just like, we're kind of conditioned to go through and say certain things. And until you go through, whether it's miscarriage, pregnancy loss, another life event, anything, I don't think you can really judge people as hard as it is, because again, it comes into that blame, like, well, why did they say that? Or, you know, it's difficult. Like, we just have to understand, like, everybody's going through something. We might not always understand, you know, what they're going through in that moment, and just try and be, I think, a little bit more understanding.
Yeah, I think I've definitely done the saying, gosh, what was it? Oh, when are you going to have kids? And
I think I did it a lot when I was younger. A lot.
Yeah, and since I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, or like, are you guys trying for a second, or, you know, a sibling? And it's like, gosh, how many people I know, like in my own neighborhood, I know of at least 6 people that either had secondary infertility or haven't been able to have a child. And it's like, and it's only because you found out once they found out your story and like what you're going through. And it's like, if this is just in my own neighborhood, like, you know what I mean? It's crazy. So but yeah, the questions, I mean, I feel like I should take a step back in time and be like, I'm so sorry I ever asked that question.
We can apologize now.
I
I
know.
don't know.
I wouldn't even remember probably half of the people I said it to, but it's like, you just like think back and you're like, oh, I was that person, wasn't I, at some point? You know, I asked that question or I said XYZ, and
Yeah, but that's helpful because then we
Yeah.
can be like, whenever someone comes to us, like, because it does anger a lot of people. When they come to you and say that, just remember you were that person.
yes, I know.
And you were well-meaning and you weren't trying to be horrible and you were
I
trying to be
know.
caring and loving
I
and
know.
wanting
Yeah,
babies and people to have babies. And
exactly.
so it's just remembering like we were that person
You
too.
were. Yeah, exactly. Which is why, like, you know, when people ask, and, you know, I think, and everyone has a right to feel their own feelings for whatever reason, but, you know, I think, like, you know, some people, they'll like get really offended if they ask, you know, like, oh, is this your first kid? And then they're like, well, I'm not sure how to answer that, because if I've had, you know, previous miscarriages or losses, and they're like, I can't believe they would ask that. And it's like, while I can see, you know, from a perspective where that's coming from, I think, like, to your point, I think I just like to look at it in a different light, because, you know, I was that naive person. I didn't know what I didn't know at one point. And then, you know, like I said, like, we're all just humans. Like, we're just, you know, some might be intentional or some might have a no filter, but I think for the majority of us, like, we're just trying to do the best we can. So I think it's just giving a little bit of grace, I think, has also helped throughout this whole process, you know. Give grace to people.
That's why I've named my daughter Grace, the one that I'm pregnant with right now.
Oh, I love that name. My cousin's name is Grace too, and that was my father's mother's name was Grace. It's a beautiful name.
Yeah, well, it was I said, what do I need most right now? Grace. And before we knew, before we got this far in the pregnancy, I was like, that will be the baby's name until we know what it is. And then if it's a girl, she'll continue to be Grace, and if it's a girl, and she's Grace. But yeah, my first loss was Joy. My second loss was Patience, and this one is Grace. So hopefully she'll be born, but we won't know until then. So
Yeah.
praying
Keep
and praying.
I'll be praying for you too. I know it's so tough. I still, like, every day I'm just like, I know I'm pregnant, but you just feel like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know what I mean? It's like, because I think for so many, at least for me, like, for me, I've always, like, I could see ahead, like, okay, like, you know, I plan everything out in your future, and you're like, okay, I can picture myself like either living in this house or doing this job, or I can picture this. And it's like, while I've always dreamt of having a family and always knew at some point I would have a family, it's like, now it's kind of like, but I can't picture it the way I used to. Like, I can't, you know, because it just feels so far out of reach, even though technically, like, we should have a baby in our arms in like 6 weeks. It just still feels so untangible, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really
Well,
hard.
I will be praying for you. I will be praying for the baby. I'll be praying
Thank you.
that everything goes well.
Yeah.
And a baby in your arms in 6 to 7 weeks, because I think 6 to 7, because let's face it, they don't always come.
They're going to induce it by 39 weeks is what they've said.
Oh, right. Okay. So
I think it would be about, we'll see. Who knows? I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, things can change. It's like, you know, you can go into labor tomorrow. I mean, let's hope not, but
no, let's hope not. Let's hope not. It's really stressful when that happens before sort of 37 weeks, because 37 is when they're like, yep, you're all good. Whenever.
Yeah, exactly. I know. So
the baby would still be fine. Like, they can do a lot of things now. So
they say after 36 weeks, like, they're pretty much okay, like, out of the NICU, they feel. But
I mean, look, bad things can still happen, obviously, but I you know, from what I've experienced from other women, from 33 weeks you're okay. Like, most twins are born at 32. So
and somebody I follow on Instagram, actually, she just recently had she had developed like overnight preeclampsia, which was like
Wow.
came on like super, super sudden. She was like fine for her whole pregnancy, and she started having like really bad abdominal pain and whatnot. And anyway, she went in, they couldn't get the meds weren't really helping it. And so they induced her at 33, I think, weeks and a few days. And the baby didn't even need oxygen, like totally fine. And it was in the NICU for like 4 days. And I think the baby was coming home today or something, but it's just crazy. Like, it's just
That's awesome.
amazing.
That's so
it's like, so hearing things like that, it's like, you know, when there's so much negative all the time, you know, it can become overwhelming, right? When it's just so much sadness and it's so heavy all the time, it's like those little things are just like glimpses of like good and hope. And it like, you know, it's good to
Hold
see
on.
stories like that.
Hold on to the hope, because the hope is what is going to keep us going and keep us like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to meet this baby.
I know. I know.
But
Gotta hang on to everything you can.
thank you so much for speaking with me, and
Absolutely.
I can't wait for you to meet your baby, and I want to see the pictures and everything, and I know that it's hard right now, but I think this will happen for you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be
Yeah, we'll get there. I have faith it will. So just like every just take it like one day at a time. It's like each day is one day closer. You know, it's just like it's one more day, one more week. You know, it's like all these like little milestones. So it's like, so it goes slow, but it also goes fast at the same time. So
Yeah.
And now, so you're due, when are you due?
The 20th of June.
Oh, my sisters do that same week, I think.
Oh, there's another lady who's due that week as well. So it's going to be really interesting if we all have the same time.
Winter for you. I guess it's winter time then, right? Is it winter?
Yeah, it's going to be cold.
Yeah, it's summer here. Yeah, I forget your seasons are like, I think when I was in Sydney, it was like around US Thanksgiving, so like late November, and it was just heading into summer, and it was like beautiful. It was like
I'm still giving birth naked. I don't care.
Yeah.
When I'm in that much pain, I'm like, no, everything's off.
Yeah, right.
I can't do a live birth. It's terrible. I can't.
Oh my gosh, I know. I'm gonna be like, give me all the meds.
Honestly, I the last two I had home births because I didn't want the option of having drugs. So yeah, but the first one, I had the drugs. Not all of them, but just like Gassadair. I
With
needed
no
that.
drug, like how awful was it without drugs? Realistic, really.
I made it.
Really?
And the food poisoning one was pretty bad, but the one without food poisoning was fun. Yeah, no, it's actually not as bad as you'd think. And it was terrible, like painful, really awful. But in terms of like, if I can do it, anyone can.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, because I'm terrible with pain.
Yeah.
So if I can do it, anyone can. But yeah, I just heard with epidural it can make it last longer. So I just was like, well, I don't want to make it last longer and make it really hard on my body. So I was just like, I'll just you know, do it as naturally as I can. And I did. And yeah.
Amazing.
So but yeah, if you feel up for it, you know, go for it.
Wow.
Just let me know how it goes. You'll be like, I did the epidural. I did it.
I know.
I did it naturally.
I know.
You lied.
Oh my cousin, I think, had all three. Well, she had twins, and then she had her oldest. So she has 3 kids, but she did natural for everything. Like, and she went through IVF. She went through infertility too. This is like 10, 15 years ago. So it was like a while ago. But she basically took this whole approach of like, I'm going holistic. I'm like cutting chemicals. I'm cutting this out. I'm cutting this, you know, everything she could. Like, she needed control, like, you know, because we need control. And that was her way of gaining control. And so she was like, I'm not having meds. I'm doing totally natural. And I just thought like she was a warrior when I heard that she had twins naturally. I was like, oh my gosh.
It's crazy. Twins. Yeah, I can bear. I mean, I push out one and then I'm like, I can't even get the placenta out. I'm so tired. They're like, push. And I'm like, I'm pushing. And they're like, oh, the placenta's not coming. I'm like, I know. I can't, I'm pushing. I can't do anything else. And they're like, okay, we'll give you the needle thing. I'm like, okay. Go for it. Right in the butt. it hurts so much. That need.
I don't think
But
it's so much of the natural, like actual birth that I worry about without meds. It's like if you end up getting a tear or they need to cut or like that part is what worries me without any pain meds. I've just heard like horror stories.
that's after.
Yeah.
That's after. During, you're kind of like, you got the adrenaline, because that's what you
true.
get. So you get the adrenaline, you get all the things. So it's after where you're like, oh no, I'm in pain. This hurts.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Going through it,
So
there's so much going on.
The labor part is really horrible, but you can make it through like without meds. But it's the after part that you're like, no, I've got my baby now.
Mhm.
Give me the drugs. Like it's really bad.
Yeah.
Like you want all the pain meds, but then you want to breastfeed, so then you can't.
I know.
So,
well, that's the thing. So like I don't even know. So like, what do you do if they give you pain meds? You can't breastfeed then, can you? Do they have like a milk bank or something?
It's up to you what you want to do. Like for me, I just had paracetamol and stuff. I didn't have strong pain meds, so that's what I stuck with. But when I had my first, I actually got morphine. They gave me morphine, which was terrible. Don't do it, people. Because it made me shake for 3 days. But that was terrible, and I wish I hadn't done that. But I still breastfed. I didn't even know though. I wasn't awake to anything like medical. Breastfed and did the things, but he's fine. He's alive. He's 7.
Wow.
Must be okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, just paracetamol works. Honestly, it does take a lot of the pain away. It doesn't take all of the pain away. Like if you've got evolutionary pains and things like that, which you might have because you know it's not actually your first pregnancy. And I find with your first pregnancy you get less pain, but with the second and third, like and so on, it's more painful. So
interesting.
Yeah, but
you think it would be the opposite.
Yeah, no, it's more, the after pains are more painful. I think because your body knows. So it's like trying to snap back. It's trying to do its thing, you know, it's trying to go through those processes. And it like hurts because it's like more like, like the womb, especially if you're breastfeeding, every time I breastfed, it hurt so much because my womb was contracting back as I was breastfeeding. So I didn't want to breastfeed a lot of the time, but I forced myself to do it, obviously, because of the bond and the connection and all that. But yeah, it might be very painful when you do it, and you just you can get through it. You can get through it, but it's really, it's not nice. Like I had postnatal with my second because it was just so painful. But I was prepared for my third. I was like, it's going to be painful. It's okay. It's not the baby's fault. yeah. Right. Yeah. It's your body's just trying to go back to your original state. So but give yourself grace, like we said, and you'll be able to do it. But so thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely.
Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.